Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are going deep inside the world of high-security locks to figure out what makes them so tough to pick. And here's a hint. It's not just about having more pins. It's about having pins that are literally designed to lie to you.
So yeah, what's the big secret? It's not magic. It's a really clever world of mechanical deception. You can think of it like a puzzle box, but one that's specifically built to mislead you and frustrate you if you don't have the key. And we're going to see exactly how they pull it off.
Okay, so before we can really appreciate all the tricks and traps, we've got to understand the basic rules of the game. At its heart, a standard, run-of-the-mill lock is a pretty simple and, honest mechanical puzzle.
So inside a normal lock, you've got the outer casing, the part that stays still, called the hull, and inside that is the part that actually turns when you use a key. That's the plug. What stops the plug from turning all the time are these little stacks of pins that go between the two. The bottom ones are called key pins, and the top ones are driver pins.
Now the whole game, everything about picking a lock, boils down to this one idea: the shear line. It's that microscopic gap where the inner plug and the outer hull meet. The only way that plug can turn is if you can lift every single one of those pin stacks so the little break between the top pin and the bottom pin lines up perfectly right at that shear line. It's a mechanical sweet spot.
Right, so how do you do that without the key? Well, this is what lockpicking is all about. You apply just a little bit of turning pressure, we call it tension, and this exploits tiny microscopic imperfections inside the lock. Because of those flaws, one pin, and only one, will get stuck first. That's your binding pin. The whole process is finding that binding pin, lifting it just until you feel a little click as it sets at the shear line, and then moving on to find the next pin that binds. You just repeat that over and over.
In a simple lock, the feedback it gives you is honest. You get this clean, sharp click. The core might give just a tiny little bit, and you know, okay, I've set that pin correctly. You can feel that you're making real progress one pin at a time.
But here's where things get really, really clever. The people who make high-security locks, they know this whole process inside and out. So, they asked a fantastic question. What if we designed pins that give the picker that same satisfying click, but it's a total lie?
And that brings us to their first line of defense: security pins. These are basically driver pins that have been specially shaped with one goal in mind: to give you completely false feedback and make you think you're on the right track when you're actually falling into a trap.
So let's meet a couple of the most common tricksters: spool pins and mushroom pins. A spool pin is kind of obvious. It's shaped like a spool of thread, thinner in the middle. A mushroom pin has a flared end that's wider than its body. And these shapes are absolutely on purpose. They're designed to get snagged.
This creates a condition that pickers call a false set. As you lift a spool pin, its narrow middle part gets caught on the shear line, and that lets the plug turn pretty significantly. You feel this deep rotation and a click, and you think, yes, I got it. But you haven't. You've just walked right into the trap the lock set for you. And believe me, the difference in feel is just night and day. A standard pin gives you that clean, sharp click. With the spool pin, you get that big, dramatic turn into a false set. But to actually set the pin, you have to keep pushing it up past that narrow section, which actually forces the plug to turn backwards. We call that counter-rotation. It's a really weird, confusing feeling, because you're pushing the pin up to make progress, but the lock is physically pushing back at you, telling you you're failing.
Okay, so a single, clever trap like a spool pin is one thing. But what if the lock could set up an entire minefield? Well, that brings us to the next level of deception.
Meet the serrated pin. Instead of having one big lip designed to catch you, its entire body is covered in these tiny little grooves, and every single one of those grooves is designed to snag on the edge of the shear line. The effect is, well, it's maddening. As you're pushing a serrated pin up, you just feel click after tiny click after tiny click. It's this constant, gritty, crunchy feedback, and it makes it almost impossible to know for sure if you've actually reached the real shear line, or if your pick is just caught on yet another one of its tiny teeth.
So all of this brings us to what you could call the boss battle. Because the really high security locks, they don't just use one of these tricks. No way. They layer their defenses, combining all these different pins and mechanisms into a puzzle that actively fights you every single step of the way.
They'll use hybrid pins. Imagine a spool pin that is also covered in serrations. Yeah. They'll add things called sidebars, which are entirely separate locking mechanisms that mean you don't just have to lift the pins to the right height, you also have to rotate them to the perfect angle. And they'll even cut the keyway in these jagged, winding shapes that make it a huge challenge to even get your tools in there in the first place.
And you can see this in the real world, in some of the most respected high-security locks. The American Lock 1100, for example, is famous for combining the counter-rotation of spool pins with the gritty uncertainty of serrated pins. And then you have locks like the Medeco Biaxial, which forces you to solve two puzzles at once, lifting its mushroom pins up while also twisting them correctly to operate that sidebar. Each new layer doesn't just add to the difficulty, it multiplies it.
But here's the really fascinating twist in all of this. For every engineer who's designing a tougher lock, there's a whole community of people out there who see it not as a barrier, but as a brand new, exciting puzzle that needs to be solved.
This is the world of LockSARP. It's a global hobby where thousands of enthusiasts, locksmiths, and security pros legally pick locks just for the fun and the challenge of it. For them, it is not about breaking in. It's about understanding the mechanism and solving that puzzle.
And what's really cool is that this community actually plays a huge role in all of our security. Hobbyists are often the very first people to discover new ways to bypass a lock, and they often work with the manufacturers, sharing what they've found so that the companies can then design even better, more secure locks for all of us. It's a really cool symbiotic relationship.
Which kind of leaves us with a fun thought to chew on. This constant back and forth between the lock makers and the locksport community has created this amazing arms race of ingenuity. Is the goal to make a truly unpickable lock? Or is it to design a better, more interesting puzzle? Either way, the pickers get a fun new challenge, and the rest of us get more secure locks.
Hey, if you enjoyed solving this little mechanical puzzle with us today, make sure you subscribe for more explainers from The Explainer.